Okay, hi everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. This week's presentation, we're going to look at vicarious liability and on Tadros' paper. Pretty interesting concept, and we're going to see why. Okay, I think before we start, it's better that we look at the whole trajectory of our course thus far and to see how vicarious liability fits into the bigger picture of the ethics of defensive harm and what we've been discussing so far. Right? It's nice to understand how this concept connects with the previous concepts that we've seen. Okay, but because we can't possibly go through all the papers, we're just going to connect it to the most recent essay by Fabre. So just a quick recap on Fabre's argument is that she says that civilians who provide combatants with military resources, such as guns, that are necessary to conduct warfare, let's call them CM, are widely deemed liable to attack, while civilians who provide them with welfare resources, such as food and medicine, let's call them CW, are widely deemed immune from it. Okay, and she argues that there's no compelling distinction between CW and CM, and the way she does it is largely negative. That means she doesn't argue that for positive thesis that there's no compelling reason. Rather, she goes through some of the reasons that exist that perpetuate that this distinction, and she rejects them one by one on grounds that they are not compelling. Okay, so she attempts to debunk all our intuitive beliefs we might have that there's a distinction between CW and CM. And I think the core of her argument is to say that first, right, trying to distinguish liability based on causal contribution or causal participation is not appealing. It's not compelling, right? And just a quick recap, right? So she admits that we need some form of a threshold of causal significance to say that, hey, wait, once you cross this threshold, you are liable to attack. You are liable to be killed. Again, following the laws of proportionality as well. Okay, so she admits that there is this threshold. And what motivates this threshold is because certain actions, right, intuitively, certain actions don't warrant somebody to be liable. And she considers some very trivial cases, tightening screws on a tank engine, right? Maybe scrubbing the boots of a soldier, right? Clearly, these conducts or these participation don't make a civilian liable, okay? And I think that is true on some intuitive level, okay? But the contention is this, right? She admits that a contribution must on its own terms meet an individual a contribution must on its own individual terms meet a threshold of causal significance in order for its author, in this case for the civilians, to be deemed liable. Okay, she admits this. Okay, the interesting part or the contention is this. In the next few passages, she then says, determining whether civilians meet those conditions is almost impossible. So she admits that we need a threshold. And then immediately after that, she says that, you know what, it's quite impossible to say what those thresholds are and whether somebody meets or exceeds that threshold. Okay? And what's interesting for me, at least, when I read Fabre's paper, is that she concludes the paper by saying that to the extent that we are skeptical of finding this threshold, we should err on the side of not harming. Particularly if our potential target is not herself directly posing a lethal threat. Okay, so just to oversimplify what she's saying is that first, we cannot tell how much contribution warrants somebody liable. Therefore, we shouldn't kill civilians. Okay, and her view is actually what Tadros calls a strict non-combatant immunity. She's saying that as long as you are a civilian, a non-combatant, you are not liable, regardless of how much or how often you contribute to the war. Okay, It seems that she is quite benevolent, overly benevolent in many ways. Well, that's praiseworthy in many ways. All right, but it's not difficult to see what the problem is or what's unappealing about Fabre's proposal is. And there's actually a real life example that I would like to share with you all, and I would like everyone here to consider is on this curious case of Adolf Eichmann. Okay, so just a bit of background. Adolf Eichmann was a Nazi. He was in charge of orchestrating the final solution. The final solution is a project that massacred Jews, the Jewish people. Okay, important things to note here is he is not a frontliner. He was not a frontliner. He didn't actually held guns to people's head. He didn't actually kill anyone. Or in Fabre's word, he isn't directly posing a lethal threat. He wasn't directly posing a lethal threat. All he did was on a managerial level, right? He planned, manages the whole process of sending many people to their death, many innocent civilians to their deaths. Okay, and what really happened with Adolf Eichmann, contra to Fabre, is he was sentenced to death. He was charged over 10 counts of war crimes, committing over 10 counts of war crimes. And the reason that he kept bringing up to defend himself was, I was just following orders. And this was very interesting to many philosophers, particularly Hannah Arendt, who wrote extensively on Eichmann. This reason isn't sufficient, right, to make him immune to those charges. So in other words, his complaint that I was just following orders, that complaint wasn't taken seriously in court, right? Ultimately, he was tried and he was sentenced to death. So in this sense, we can interpret Eichmann as liable, right? Whatever cases he put out there, it wasn't considered like to be a significant reason or a significant justification to why he orchestrated a massacre. Okay, so he can't complain, at least not in a morally significant way. Okay, so here we have a tension. We have a tension. So notice what Fabre said. Fabre said that when we doubt, right, if there is a threshold which civilians' contribution can cross and count as liable, Eichmann shouldn't be charged with war crimes, right? Eichmann shouldn't be charged. Why? Because we cannot determine the level, the moral significance of his contribution to the massacre. So we should err on the side of caution and not kill him. But we did. So we are faced with two ways of approaching, right? The first way is to admit that we have done something terribly wrong to Eichmann for charging him and killing him. Okay? Notice that I said that we have done something wrong to him. We might not have done something wrong in general because, retribution ethics might come into play. So either we admit that we have done something terribly wrong to him, or Fabre's proposal is unappealing. Something has gone awry in Fabre's proposal, right? Insofar as no, certain civilians, certain non-combatants are liable, right? So here, I think this background should provide some more motivation as to why Tadros is proposing a different form of liability, which he calls vicarious liability. All right. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to see you all in part 2 of this presentation. So yeah, so this is the whole background that motivates Tadros's thesis.